What is up as a figure hunter? Today we're going to do a comparison review of the Garmin Fenix 7X in its variety of differences compared to the Garmin Tactix 7 because I get a lot of questions about the nuanced differences and how they look. So we're going to dive into all those details. If you like this review, please give it a thumbs up. Please consider subscribing for more. So we're going to look at it in a few basic layers, and that's we're not going to get into all the technical ultra detailed differences when it comes to software functionality. We're going to look at some of the design differences. So number one, we're going to discuss the variation of different options within the Tactix 7 and the Fenix 7X and the prices along with it. Number two, we're going to look at the design differences by looking at it just sort of hands-on. Number three, we're going to discuss the software differences and look quickly at the software differences that primarily or only are included on the Tactix 7. And then four, we're going to talk about the overall summary. If you were leaning towards the 7X, what variation I would consider getting, what if you're leaning towards the Tactix 7, what variation, and if you're in the middle, sort of some thoughts around there. So looking at the differences, we're going to focus first on the Fenix 7X, and we're going to talk about how you build a layer on top of each other. $900 will get you the Fenix 7X solar only. Solar only, but it means more than just a few things. So at that price point, you don't get titanium, so it's 11% heavier than the Fenix 7X Sapphire Solar. So no titanium. You do not get dual band GPS. You don't get a variety of colors to choose from, and it is lacking 16 gigabytes of storage versus the 32 on the big brother Fenix 7X. So on the Fenix 7X Sapphire Solar, you will obviously get sapphire glass that is solar capable, as well as you'll get titanium, dual band GPS, a color spectrum, and 32 gigabytes for $1,000. Now moving to the Tactix 7, it has a few variations that are a little bit different. At $1,100, you get the Tactix 7 Standard. Now the Tactix 7 Standard only lacks two simple differences. It's non-solar, so you're stuck with whatever the battery life is out of the box. And it does not include anything but just a latex band. When you move to the Tactix 7 Pro, the only difference you're stepping up is you're adding solar, which adds approximately 9 days of battery life if you're getting reasonable sun coverage, and the extra tactical nylon band, which is $130 retail value. Now, beyond that, the Tactix 7 also offers a specialty ballistic edition at $1,300, but we're not going to focus on that because this is not a review of the ballistic capabilities. So on all the watches, their base battery power, battery life is 28 days. So they're all at 4 weeks. But if you were to instead get the Tactix 7 Standard that doesn't have solar, you would not be able to expand that to 37 days. So there's an extra 9 days of potential for battery life with all the other options we just mentioned. It's just the Tactix 7 Standard doesn't have solar capabilities. They're all the same weight, except for if you got the 7X solar only, you would have stainless steel. It would be a little bit heavier, about 11.5% heavier, and you'd be lacking some of the storage size. So those are the primary differences when it comes to the variety, the variational options that you can get or choose from. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to look at a hands-on to look at how they look in design differences and then talk about some of the software aspects. Okay, so looking at both of them, you can see that it's got the same basic overall size, but there's just a primary difference on the bezel. So the bezel differences, I think, are kind of considerable. Like the Fenix 7X bezel, it has sort of an angled down look to it, but because it has the large flat surface up top, or the overall surface on the edge of the bezel has a wider width to it, it looks like there's just more bezel looking at it. Now it's the same sort of distance if you were to go from the inside of the glass to the edge of the full casing, but because the Tactix 7 has both a flat bezel as well as a more narrow top to the bezel, it just looks less bezel intensive. You get the same, basically they're both going to be 51 millimeters wide and about 16.5 millimeters thick. They're going to be the same weight if you go with the full scale options on both. If you go with the 7X solar only, it's going to be about 11.5% heavier. The same battery life on both, unless you went with the Tactix 7 standard, which does not have solar, and you're going to pick up 9 extra days there on just general battery life. But the bezel difference is the primary thing, and it's something that many people, or at least I have heard, that they like the bezel on the Tactix 7 a lot. So you really are getting a watch for a 2 to 3 year period. So the bezel is going to be stuck with you for a while, so it's worthwhile. The other thing to note is that the Fenix 7 has standard, just regular old buttons, and the Tactix has these knurled buttons. See if I can get it to catch the light. There you go. So it's just got a rough edge to each of the buttons. And then ironically, another reviewer mentioned this, and I actually feel the same thing. And testing it is that the the Tactix 7 has a clickier button press to it. And it's not like this is not clicky or doesn't feel quality. It's just that every single one of these buttons has a snappy click to it. And not every single one of these buttons has the same sort of feel to the snappy button click. But those are the basic overall, same sensors, same touch screen as we saw, same backlight brightness. So if you measure it with a light meter, it's the same backlight brightness. But I just mostly want to show the differences in how they look side by side, one against the other, because part of the buying experience, part of the buying decision comes down to what bezel style you prefer if you're not buying it for tactical features. Happen to get the pro version is you get this tactical nylon band, which I've done a review for. It is very, so like this is what I showed in the review, is that if you were to hold it like that, it doesn't really move, and it has a very rigid feel to it. Although, as I have been forcing myself to test it when testing the Tactix 7, I don't find it to be terribly terrible. But this, a rubber band obviously has way more flex and movement to it, but you can just see between just a generic rubber band, you have this sort of, I think it's titanium clasp here. It's a $130 band. This is what you would get, not in the green color, because this is just special and different, but you would get the black color along with a latex band if you got the pro version of the Tactix 7. Okay, so looking at the software side of things, they're going to be the same basic overall guts, except some nuanced differences in the Tactix 7. Same morning report, same nightly HRV status, same sleep, same body battery, training analytics, advanced training analytics, the training readiness, the widgets, the glances options, and the sports profiles in general on the regular traditional sports tracking. One minor difference with the Tactix 7 is because it has specialty software, it is not on the beta alpha program, which means you can't get some of those newer features until they are fully ready to be released to the masses. So there are times where there's going to be, or right now it doesn't have the jet lag advisor on the Tactix 7 because you can't get it over beta or alpha, to the two versions that are out there for Garmin watches that are available on the 7X. So the main thing with the Tactix 7 are the really specialty sports profiles and a couple of specialty capabilities in the design features. Let's take a closer look. Okay, so there's a few basics that are going to be different in the overall capabilities on the sport profile side. So you can see here, you're going to have a few significant ones. So the fly feature got a lot of different tech instrument aspects to it, as well as a specific flight monitor in connection to local airports for weather and for weather up in the skies, I guess. Reference point is something new. I think it's just going to snap a reference point. There are similar aspects. I'm not sure the full spec differences between creating a path on a regular sport profile and this. You have the project waypoint, which I think will just sort of tag a drop point. And then you have some really specific ones, Jump Master, which will give you, if you're depending on what type of jump you're doing, you put in your target jump goals and it will track the jump for you, as well as the tactical. Now that's obviously like the big thing featured in here. And the tactical just has a number of different components that you can dive into when it comes to location. And people in the tactical universe know what this would mean as far as tactical aspects go. So those are the primary differences, major aviation differences, parachuting and tactical. And then when it comes to other primary differences that are of note, you have a night vision, which basically dims the screen to almost not negligible to the naked eye, but when you're using night vision goggles, works perfectly to be able to pick up what your watch shows. Stealth mode, which turns off all signaling, as well as the ultimate kill switch, which basically, if you're in a dogfight or if you're pinned down and you want to delete everything, this will just wipe the whole thing out. So those are the features, and obviously the similarities are very broad when it comes to day-to-day life of everyday people. But that's what you do get difference-wise, one versus the other when it comes to all these special features. That is the summary in a nutshell of all the different aspects, the design and the features and the software, those basic things. What do I think of the differences? I think if you are leaning towards the 7X, and I'm going to say the differences and the variations you could choose with either separate level. If you're leaning towards the 7X, definitely go Sapphire Solar. Pay the extra $100 to go from $900 to $1,000, because for $100 you're getting a titanium bezel and backing, you're getting dual band GPS and an extra 16 gigabytes of storage, or twice the storage for Spotify playlists or music or whatever you want, as well as you're getting a variety of colors you could choose from if you wanted to go with the white, with the blue, with sandstone, that sort of thing. If you're leaning towards a Tactix 7, I honestly think you should just get the standard. I don't think the extra band, unless you really want this tactical rugged band, is worth it to be able to step up. And I think 28 days of battery life should satisfy anybody in the world for the most part. So you're not getting the extra potential 9 days, depending on how much. You should just go with, save yourself $200 extra and just get the $1,100 7 standard. Now, if you're on the fence between the two of these, it really is a matter of choice and style. I think the Tactix 7 looks definitively better to me. With the flat bezel, the more narrow bezel on the top end, it just looks cleaner. It looks better. It looks more rugged, but it just looks better to me. But if for me it was a debate over the two, I would be debating the Tactix 7 over the Enduro 2, which I don't have, and we're just going to talk about it in general. The Enduro 2 is also $1,100. It's actually on sale at different times more often than the Tactix 7, because the Enduro 2 is more for the mass market. So the Enduro 2 has an extra band, and it's a latex and Velcro band, as well as it has 21% extra battery life just out of the box, and more battery life difference if you were comparing it to the Tactix 7 standard, which doesn't have solar, as well as it has green accents, and I personally like the green accent look. So I would opt for those options of extra bands and the extra battery life over necessarily the bezel of the Tactix 7, although I'm totally on the fence. I do think the bezel just looks really sharp. So with that, that's the comparison review for the Garmin Fenix 7X across the variety of options compared to the Garmin Tactix 7 and the variety of options there. It's the Fit Gear Hunter. Thanks so much for watching.